What's good, y'all? It is Kodey Stauffer here with the Playmakers Corner podcast. It is so good to be back on an episode here, and we are going to continue to do season previews, but really, I'm just laying down the groundwork here at the beginning of the episode to let you know that this conjoint episode is a group effort on behalf of Coach V and myself here, where Coach V is going to wrap up the remainder of his programs to start us off. And then I'm going to bounce us way back to the 5A level here and talk about some teams that I did previews for. So go ahead and sit tight, listen to some of Coach V's right up front here, and stay tuned for mine afterwards.
All right, let's quickly talk about Alameda. Last season, I had them going 2-7 with a window of wins anywhere between 0 and 3, and they went 1-8. Below where I predicted them to go. The one win they won was a 46-0 win. At the beginning of the season, it doesn't say who. It just says varsity opponent. But you know what? I'm just going to assume that is Mitchell, because Mitchell decided not to have a varsity team. And so that might have been their JV team. I honestly don't know. It literally does not say anything. But other than that, they lost every other game from there on. Littleton 46-14, Lincoln in a close one 28-20, Devlin 42-6, TCA 55-6, Inglewood 40-0, Denver 55-6, Elizabeth 56-0, Denver West 36-6. They would have one other game that was close after that first one against a varsity opponent, and that would be Lincoln. So just a very embarrassing season here. I can't even talk about players really, because the stats are incomplete, so I'm just not even going to bother. It's a whole headache there. Post your stats. I've been saying this for like 3 freaking years, so you got to figure it out. Key players, I guess Tez Glover, he's still over there doing his thing. In 7 games, had 88 yards, 2 touchdowns, so there you go. Also had 301 yards and 2 touchdowns as one of the lone bright spots, for this team here. So there you go. They also have Cato Garcia, incoming junior quarterback, threw for 349 yards, 4 touchdowns and 9 picks, while rushing for 132 and 2. So there you go. Now let's get to predictions here. I'm just going to be really honest. I don't think they're going to win many games. There's only one game I have them winning, and that's against a Mitchell, because I'm just going to assume that's who they beat last season. But other than that, they played Jefferson, Pinnacle, the Academy, Inglewood, Devlin, then Mitchell, TCA, Denver West, Lincoln. I don't have them winning any of those games outside of the Mitchell game. This program is just very much downhill, and I think there's a good chance they even lose to Mitchell. But other than that, I mean, their only real winnable games here is maybe... it's only one other game, and it's probably Lincoln. Actually, maybe the Pinnacle, but honestly, I don't know. They just don't have a lot of consistency over there, and I need them to start posting stats and film. That is the literal bare minimum. Until then, I just don't have a lot of faith in them, so I guess we'll see what happens. I'd love to be proven wrong. All right, now up next, we're going to talk about Battle Mountain. It's going to be a pretty short preview. Last season, they did not have a varsity team, and I think it was kind of known back then. It was a little bit more of a rumor, but they would end up deciding a little bit later on, closer to the start of the season. So there you go there, but they will be coming back because of how late they decided to not have a varsity season last year. So they'll have a varsity one this year. And so this one's kind of tough. There's no seniors, I mean, with stats at least, to talk about. There's not too many key players. I mean, I'm going to mention Kits Petrovsky here. He was a sophomore 2 years ago, where he was their leading passer and rusher. This is really the only player I could find that I could think could potentially be a big-time contributor. If he's even interested in football, there could be a chance he quit. But in case he didn't, he would be coming back for his senior year, and that would be pretty big. Now, looking at predictions, I'm not going to spend too much time here. I don't know if they win a game. I think they go 0-8, maybe with the window of wins, though, between 0 and 2 here. And I really only say that because as of right now, they've only scheduled 8 games. I think you could schedule 10 games max. Maybe they somehow schedule 2 games against teams that are somehow worse. Like I said, I don't know. I'm recording this on July 15th. But as of right now, I just have a really hard time seeing them win. They need to gain some consistency and reestablish that program. So we'll see what happens in the fall. So up next, we're going to talk about Denver West. Originally, I thought they were going to go 3-6 with the window of wins between 2 and 5 here. But they went 5-4, still within the window of wins, but definitely in that upper part of the prediction. Let's talk about it, though. To start, they would play Manual and beat them 40-36 in a pretty crazy game. They then rack up some dominant wins over Lincoln and Flatirons Academy, 46-0, 44-0 respectively. Then drop one to Denver North, 40-12, Kent Denver 54-7, TCA 48-7, and Elizabeth 47-6 in a pretty brutal stretch. But end the season with some wins, 33-32 over Englewood in a close one, and 36-6 over Alameda. So a little bit of an up and down season, but, not completely out of the question. They did have this potential, in my opinion. Now, they do graduate some really good seniors here, including Mikhail Garcia. He was their starting quarterback who passed for 692 yards, 9 touchdowns, 9 picks, and rushed for 35 yards and a touchdown. They also graduate Ahmad Hussein, who's their lead rusher with 529 yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. But it wasn't a limited season where he only played 5 games. But even then, on defense, he also had 42 tackles and 2 picks. He was the best athlete on this team here and was also their co-leader in picks, so he will definitely be missed. They graduate Khalil Chase, their lead receiver, with 17 receptions for 377 and 6 touchdowns. Roman Blue, he filled in for Hussein at times and rushed for 356 yards and 5 touchdowns on the season. And altogether on defense, they lose a lot. 8 of their top 13 tacklers. This does include their lead tackler in Alexander Ramon. This also includes 7 of their top 10 tacklers. So a lot of leadership going, as they're going to have to restart pretty much on both sides of the ball here, as they have just new skill players that they got to look to step up, and defensive players that they got to look to for some production and leadership. But they do return a couple of pretty solid players, including Jerry Jones, the 6'3", 260-pound senior defensive lineman, had 34 tackles and 8.5 tackles for loss. He brings some good size to a defense that's losing a ton, so that's a good player to be able to build around. Also bring back Aris Yuang. Excuse me if I'm saying that wrong, but the 6', 210-pound linebacker had 37 tackles and 5.5 tackles for loss as a sophomore. Going into his junior year, he will be leading a pretty young defense over there. And then last but not least, they also return Robert Whitkey. The incoming junior had 236 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns on only 12 receptions and was their second leading receiver. But on defense, also had 18 tackles and 2 picks, where he was a co-leader in, and 3 pass deflections. That's another good athlete that they will have to build around. So even though they're losing a lot, they do have some pretty solid players coming back who they should work with. But you know what? Let's go ahead and hop into this, talk about next year. To start, they play Prospect Ridge Academy. That should definitely be a win. Englewood, I think that's a win. They graduate a lot of seniors, plus lose their head coach and starting quarterback. I mean, this was a team they beat with all of that, and of course they're losing a lot, but so are they, so I'm going to give them the win here. Manual, similar in position, they're losing a lot, so I'm giving them the win here. That is Denver West, that is. And then Jefferson, Mitchell should both be wins. TCA is probably definitely a loss. Then Lincoln, Alameda, I do think they could beat. And then Devlin, I think, is a loss. So, weirdly enough, I have Denver West going 7-2 with the window of wins between 5 and 8. They're losing some big-time contributors on both sides of the ball, including a lot of their producers on offense. But they do return some solid defensive players who should hold it down. And it also helps that they play a very easy schedule. The only playoff team on their schedule, or playoff teams on their schedule this year, is TCA and Devlin. Other than that, Manual and Englewood, I guess, could be tough teams, but I'm not confident in the losses those two teams are taking. Right now, I know what Denver West has. I know what they're bringing back, and that does make me believe that they can win some of these games against teams that are just not as good. And you know what? They also bring back their coach as well, and Cristobal Velasquez, who had a really good first season, and so going into his second year, I think you gotta feel good about it regardless here, as still, even with them losing a lot of players, they're still better than just a lot of these teams on paper. They got a lot more going for them, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with this Denver West squad going into 2024. All right, now up next, we're going to talk about Eagle Valley. Last season gave them a window of wins between 0 and 2. Did not think they were going to win that many games, to be honest with you. And they overachieved just slightly, winning one more game than expected. Let's talk about last season. To start, it would not go great, losing to two big-time playoff teams, 2A playoff teams, in Basalt 49-15 and Delta 49-6. But then they bounce back and get a very big, kind of unexpected win against Evergreen, 26-7 there. Then lose to Conifer, 37-6. Lose kind of a close one to Nawat, 29-15. Lose a close one to Palisade, 21-16. And then get blown out by Durango, 48-7. And then end on a 2-game winning streak here against Glenwood Springs, who would make the playoffs, 19-16. I feel like that kind of put their season playoff hopes into jeopardy right there. And then they would also beat Summit 36-35 in a close one. And, you know, I think that for sure would have slammed the door on any chances of Summit making the playoffs there, so they got to play spoiler there, which is pretty cool. But, you know, let's talk about some graduating seniors. They do lose some solid players, including Caven Lake. It ended up being the best season he had here, or I should say the best season an Eagle Valley quarterback has ever had here in recent years, passing for 1,227 yards, 10 touchdowns to 13 picks, while rushing for 92 yards and 2 touchdowns. He sparked an offense that they hope to build off of, and his final game is one of the more legendary ones as far as final games go, as he lit up Summit for 282 yards and 4 touchdowns and only 1 pick, while rushing for 26 yards. The previous week, he did a good job against Glenwood Springs there, going 11 of 18 for 130 yards and a touchdown and 22 yards. But you know, he ended up being a big-time contributor for them. He was previously at Salida, where he transferred from, but I want to say this is his father, who is the coach now at Eagle Valley, who coached his first year at Eagle Valley last season in Chris Lake. So that's where that transfer kind of came from there. They also graduated Elias Pena in his senior season. He was their lead rusher with 206 yards and 2 touchdowns on only 28 carries. He will be missed, as he also contributed 26 tackles. And then they graduate all PMC safety here, Kevin Hasley, first player from Eagle Valley to make an all PMC list ever, but he notched 93 tackles and 4 picks, leading the team in both categories there, while being their lead receiver with 432 yards and 2 touchdowns on 33 receptions. They also graduate Caleb Barrett, who's their sack leader with 4 sacks, and then 3 of their top 4 receivers, including Hasley there. And then on defense, I guess the final count here, the damage that has been done by graduation. They graduate 6 of their top 13 tacklers, but that does include 3 of their top 5. So definitely losing some players, but you bring back half the defense and some key players. Let's talk about some of those key players, starting with Keaton Lake. The 6'2", 170-pound athlete returns for his junior year, being an all-around player for them. He had snaps all over, looking like he got some snaps at quarterback versus Delta, where he went 3 of 8 for 75 yards and a pick. And then against Summit, 1 of 2 for 49 yards and a touchdown. That definitely could be a trick play, though. But he also had 121 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns on the season. He rushed for 56 yards against Evergreen and Conifer. But he really found a role at receiver, where he caught 21 receptions for 284 yards and 4 touchdowns, being their second lead receiver, coming off an explosive 10-reception, 134-yard, 3-touchdown performance against Summit last season to end the year there, who they upset. And it's obvious Eagle Valley has a good young athlete on their hands. You know, he could play pretty much wherever, which you should feel pretty good about. Now, there's a good chance that he ends up being their quarterback out of necessity. He has played in the system before, and they do like to pass it. It would be tough, though, because you would take away a receiver, though, in this spread offense, which I feel like he could do a lot of damage in. but we'll just have to see. Either way, I expect him to be utilized as one of the main focuses on the offensive side of the ball here. Now, they also bring back Nathan Leeper. He was their second leading tackler with 65 tackles and 5 tackles for loss, only as a sophomore. At running back, also logged some carries, the most carries out of anyone last season, but just really struggled. His carries went down slightly as the season went on, but look for him to still get involved on the offense and maybe get a bigger receiving role over there instead of at running back. And then they also bring back Isaiah Gonzalez, the incoming senior linebacker, was a top 5 tackler for them with 45 tackles and 3 tackles for loss. He's going to help this defense that do return some players, the majority of their contributors from last season. So, Eagle Valley definitely going in the right direction here. They also returned their coach from last season, Chris Lake. I thought he did a solid job with what he had, winning 3 games, including those last 2 games at the end of the season. I feel like that is a major green flag, beating teams like a Glenwood Springs, like a Summit, who have talent, who can be very explosive on the offensive side of the ball. I think that's definitely big time for Eagle Valley to win those games. And so hopefully they improve on that. But, next season I think is going to be tough. They start with Gunnison, who just moved up to 2A. I think that's a loss. Eagle Valley is still trying to improve here. Gunnison, they return a lot of players, including Buchanan, their standout athlete, one of the best in all of Colorado. That's a tough game. Then they go to Canyon City. I think that's another loss. They have 2 big defensive ends over there, plus a pair of running backs. That's kind of a tough ask for them to win against. Eagle Valley's just not a big team up front, and I don't know if this offense with a new quarterback and just new personnel will be able to outshoot their offense. So there you go. Grand Junction Central as well, I think, is a loss. Littleton, I went back and forth. If Chase Pruitt is healthy, I think that's a loss. If he's not, then I do think there's a good chance they beat him. So there you go. But I'm just going to lean loss for now. Conifer, I do think, is a loss, though. Steamboat Springs is probably a loss. They bring back some players and a nice lineman over there. Glenwood Springs, so this time, should probably be a loss here. Even though they beat him last season, it was a pretty close game. So there you go. Rifle, I think, is probably a loss. They really struggled stopping the run last season, so that's kind of where I'm getting at there. These are teams that run the ball well. Rifle brings back Valencia. I just don't know if that's a great recipe there. Same with Palisade, that's probably a loss. And then Battle Mountain, I think you definitely beat them. So there you go. I have Eagle Valley going 1-9 with a window of wins between 1 and 4. Look, I do like the direction this program is going in, but they're going to need to develop more talent in order for them to compete consistently. They do have some pieces like a Keaton Lake over there, but, I don't know if they have a quarterback the same caliber as the one that they had last year. And that is kind of an issue for sure, considering how good he was at the end of the season. So we'll see. I'm interested in seeing how they use Lake, in what way they use him on offense, whether it's receiver, running back, quarterback, or maybe a little bit of everything. And then I'm interested in seeing if this defense could take a step forward. Like I said, last season really struggled stopping the run. So we'll just have to see what happens. I do think there are some winnable games here. Littleton, like I said, I think is a winnable game. Steamboat Springs could be a winnable game. I'm just not leaning their way there. And then Battle Mountain, I think, is a pretty much guaranteed win there. They're in a much better spot. So there you go there. That is Eagle Valley, hoping that they continue to take a step forward going into 2024. All right, up next, we're talking about Prairie View, and I was straight up wrong about this team. I thought they were going to be horrible and go 1-6 with the window of wins between 1 and 4, but they went 5-5, way above expectations. So let's just go down the line and talk about what happened last season. To start, they got a good win over Silver Creek, 45-35. They would then lose to Overland, 30-14 there, but bounce back with a close win over Pooter, 21-19. They will then lose a close game to Westminster, 28-21. Then blow out North Glen, 45-6. Then lose what looks like to be a relatively close one to Bryden, 56-43 in a shootout. Then lose to Legacy, 41-7. But then beat Rangeview, 31-8. Lose to Mullen in another relatively close one, 41-30. Before ending the season with a win, 25-14 over Horizon. They had a new head head coach in Mark Gonzalez this year, and I think he really showed out and was proving his coaching chops in a lot of these games, as this team saw immediate improvement despite losing some players, it looks like. So let's talk about that, starting with the seniors that are graduating. Kunio Ishima, he was their starting quarterback, and it looked like he got hurt and only played 3 games because he was only listed in 3 games and passed for 159 yards, 2 touchdowns to 1 pick against Silver Creek, while rushing for 165 and 2 against them. And then he rushed for 25 and 1 versus Horizon. So they had to move on from him, but that's still definitely a loss, as he did start the last couple of seasons. They also graduated Colton Lance, whose season also got cut short, as he only rushed for 130 yards and a touchdown, and then caught 1 reception for 47 yards and a touchdown. Listed in only 2 games, and so that's definitely a tough loss there. They also graduate Ben Nichols. He stepped up and rushed for 685 yards and 8 touchdowns, became their leading rusher in a year plagued by injuries, it seems like. He also had 72 tackles and 11 tackles for loss at linebacker. They also graduate Quinton Winzet here. He was their lead receiver, bringing in 32 receptions for 637 yards and 7 touchdowns. Despite playing with 2 quarterbacks, he stepped up and had a productive year for this team. And then last but not least, they also graduate Fabian Aviles, I want to say. He was their lead tackler with 76 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. That's definitely somebody they'll lose, but he is a part of a bigger unit here. This defense is graduating 9 of their top 13 tacklers, so a pretty wide majority on that side of the ball. But let's talk about some key players which will lie in this offense here, starting with the incoming senior quarterback, Riker Surley. Excuse me if I'm saying that wrong, that last name that is. But, he got hot fast, throwing for 1,617 yards, 15 touchdowns, so only 4 picks, while rushing for 207 yards and 2 touchdowns. Despite losing his top receiver, he does return a couple other receivers. He is a sleeper this year, in my opinion, and could be due for a big-time senior season after having a very good junior season last year. One of the targets he'll be throwing to is Gio Terran here. He's another incoming senior, and last season was their second leading receiver with 439 yards and 2 touchdowns on 37 receptions. With Winsett gone, he's probably going to be one of the guys that they're going to target more and could potentially be a wide at 1 type guy. They also bring back Romani Perez, though. The incoming senior was their 3rd leading receiver with 306 yards and 5 touchdowns on 24 receptions. Him and Taryn have chemistry with Surley, and they should take a step forward for sure. So there you go there. And then last but not least, they also bring back Jaden Malik Moultrie. He's the highest returning tackler for the squad with 59. He will lead an extremely young and inexperienced defense going to next year, but you do got to remember, this is a team that does bring back a quarterback and 2 of his receivers who were very productive last season, so there definitely is some hope and some optimism going into 2024. But to start, they play North Glen here. And by the way, this is as of July 15th. I'm just reading off their schedule here and predicting games. But to start, they play North Glen here. That should be a win. Then they play Legend. That's definitely probably a loss. Following that, they play Westminster. I think this could be a really close game. Mason Keywood's still over there, but he does lose guys like Hunter M. Garden and some very important players. I'm still going to give it to Westminster because I do like Keywood's game, but don't get it twisted. That could definitely go the other way. But then they play Mountain Range. That should be a win. Fairview is still probably a loss. Brighton, I think, is similar to the Westminster game, but I do like Brighton's defense a lot better, so I'm going to call that a loss. Then Rocky Mountain should probably be a dub. I think that's winnable. And then they will play Fort Collins here. I think that's a loss as well. I think there's a size difference up front there. I know there's a size difference up front there, and I don't love that for Prairie View here. And then it's not scheduled yet, but it's definitely a game that will be, because they are in their league and it's Fossil Ridge, and that's another size difference plus just talent difference there for Prairie View, and so I think that's a loss. But right now I have them going 3-6, but I'm giving them a window of wins between 3 and 6. I do think they could get over 500. Now, this Prairie View team has a very promising future after their new head coach took over and found something with Surley, who has done a lot with what he has. They also have a solid line, but they do play a much tougher schedule this year. I think they should beat North Glen, Mountain Range, and Rocky Mountain Fort Collins and Westminster, I think, will be fun, close games. Same with Brighton, but their defense needs to step up. I don't know if they get over 500 or get to 500 without their defense being better than last year, which I think is a lot to ask out of a very inexperienced group where, I mean, the majority of them didn't play or contribute a whole ton on varsity last season. So we'll just have to see what happens, but I do like Prairie View's improvement and their trajectory moving forward. So I'm excited for this 2024 season for them. All right, now up next is Skyview here. Last season, Kodey predicted them to go 5-5 with a window of wins between 2 and 5, and they went exactly that, 5-5 here. Let's talk about last season here. To start, they would go on a 4-game winning streak, beating Thornton 13-0, Niwot 16-14, Adams City 43-0, and Sierra 45-0, but then lose to Denver North 35-0. They will then get a win over Littleton 28-6, then drop a close one to Wheat Ridge here 28-25, lose to Evergreen 25-6, Conifer 52-21, and then Green Mountain 69-0. A lot of losses there, but definitely an alright enough season here. Going 5-5 for Skyview is not the worst record at all. In fact, I believe this is the first time since 2017 where they did not have a losing record. So, since the pandemic, basically, which, you know, should be a plus in some ways, for sure. Now, they do graduate some players, though, as they did have a number of solid seniors, including Bryson Gutierrez. He was their starting quarterback who passed for 965 yards, 12 touchdowns to 11 picks, while rushing for 91 and 1. They also graduate Sam Cortez, their wideout one, who had 29 receptions for 316 yards and 5 touchdowns, also had 49 tackles and 3 picks on defense. They graduate Che Brown, an all-around athlete who had 219 rushing yards and a touchdown, while catching for 228 and 2 receiving touchdowns. And then on defense, have 32 tackles and a pick there. And altogether, I mean, on defense, they're only graduating 6 of their top 13 tacklers. They do graduate some key players on the offensive side, like the quarterback, receiver, and running back, but they do bring back a little bit over half of their defense and pretty much everyone else. Now, some key players to look out for going into this next season. Malachi Lambert here. The senior athlete rushed for 36 yards and caught for 6 receptions and 83 on offense, but on defense he had 42 tackles, 3 picks, 5 pass deflections. I do think he is one of the best corners, cover corners in the state, and should be able to contribute on that side of the ball. More importantly, they're just being able to just go one-on-one with the wideout ones on other teams. They also bring back Ruben Peraza Talamantes. He was their second leading tackler with 62 tackles. He looks to return for his senior year, looking to do more. And then last but not least, they also bring back Carlos Carrillo. The incoming junior running back rushed for 458 yards and 7 touchdowns as their lead rusher. He looks to probably be the focal point of this offense moving forward, especially considering they lose, one of their, I think their second leading rusher, their quarterback and receiver. He's going to have to do a lot more. But they do return the majority of this defense, which you should feel good about. And so to start, they play Thornton. I think that's a win here. I like what this Skyview team has going for them. They have a legit cornerback one, an experienced defense, and they do bring back a running back, so I'm going to give them the win there. Hinckley should for sure be a win. Niwot, it should be wins there. Fort Morgan is a loss. The Academy, I think, could probably, honestly, maybe be a win here. I went back and forth, and actually, you know what? I will say that it's going to be a win here. The Academy really doesn't have a lot going for them, unless they just take a big step forward. I just don't quite see it for them. So, you know what? Just a quick change. So, there you go. Conifer, Evergreen, Wheat Ridge, though, should all be losses. Summit will probably be a loss. Do lose some key players like Jackson Archambault and their quarterback, so I think there is a world where they win, but this game is like, it's in November 2nd. I kind of feel like they figure it out by then. This coaching staff feels more than capable of doing so. So I'm going to call it a loss. And then Green Mountain should probably be a loss there. But altogether, I have Skyview going 4-6 with a window of wins between 1 and 4. Look, the Skyview team just doesn't have a lot to work with outside of a couple of skill players here and there. But they should still have wins over Thornton, Hinckley, Niwot. I think those could be closer games, but I still favor them there. I think Summit could be a winnable game here, but I still favor Summit because it's so far at the end of the year. And then, honestly, the Academy, the more I look at that game, the more I feel like they could definitely win that one with how poorly they performed last year and with who they're losing as well in Sean Smith, who's a big-time player. So, with that being said, I mean, not a bad prediction for Skyview. They could go 4-6 here, get really close to 500. But I do think the majority of their wins will be in this first half of the season. We'll see, though. We'll see what happens for Skyview going here into the fall. All right, now up next, we're going to talk about Steamboat Springs. Last season, predicted them to go 3-6 with a window of wins between 2 and 4, and they went exactly 3-6. Let's look at the schedule here. To start, they would beat Coleridge in a close one, 21-14, then lose to Moffat County by 33, then beat Middle Park 21-6, but then go on a 2-game losing streak, losing to Aspen 42-21 and Eden 50-7. They will then add on a nice win against the Academy 32-20, and then go on a 3-game losing streak, losing to Valor Christian 40-7, Fort Lupton 47-9, and Berthoud 59-0, and just what ended up being a tough year for them. Now, let's talking about some seniors. First things first, I'm pretty sure their stats are incomplete, so I am working with what I have here. But they do graduate some important ones, including Jesse Hamrich at quarterback, who was supposed to be their starter, but only played the first 4 games, at least according to the stats, where he threw for 203 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks, and rushed for 82 yards. Him getting hurt would start a long domino effect at quarterback. They also graduate Aaron Flam. He was the senior with the most tackles with 42 and was their sack leader with 5. And then they graduate Wyatt Shaw, their third leading tackler with 36. Altogether on defense, they only lose 6 of their top 13 tacklers, but around 5 of their top tacklers out of those 6 they are graduating, so that's definitely a tough go. But they do return some key players like Waylon Lott. He should lead a relatively experienced defense as a senior. Last year he had 71 tackles. Thomas Krupp will be coming back as well. Despite only 6 games being listed for him, the incoming junior running back rushed for 800 yards and 8 touchdowns, while catching 17 receptions for 133 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a big-time performance in those wins. Just looking at it here, against Coleridge, 20 carries, 174 yards, 2 receptions, 55 yards, 2 touchdowns. Middle Park, 15 carries for 167 yards, 2 touchdowns. The Academy, 30 carries for 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 receptions for 34. And then against Eden, he ran for 94 yards and a touchdown with 4 receptions for 15 yards. So he's definitely a big-time athlete coming back for them and should be the focal point of that team moving forward. On the offensive line, they return some solid senior linemen here. Both of them are around the 6'2", 270 range, and Ethan Jackson Oates and Owen Warwick. I believe they both play tackle, so there you go there. And then I believe Thomas Cobb will be the starter at quarterback. He had 144 passing yards and 3 picks in 4 games, only as a sophomore. So that's definitely not bad at all. But altogether, Steamboat Springs, it could definitely be worse. They only graduate about half their defense here, and then they bring back a running back and some solid linemen. It could definitely be worse. They should be able to be all right here. But to start, they do play Coleridge. I think it's going to be a loss, but a very close one. It could definitely flip there. Then they play Moffat County. I think this is a loss. Zach Hedman over there scored 3 touchdowns on them as a junior. He'll be coming back, and I don't love that Steamboat has also lost half their defense, so not a great matchup. But then they should beat Middle Park. I think they should beat Aspen after that as well. That'll be a closer one, but I think that's still a dub. Summit is probably still a loss, but then they should beat Eagle Valley, Battle Mountain, and then I don't think they'll beat Palisade, Glenwood Springs, or Rifle there. But altogether, I have Steamboat Springs going 4-6 with the window of wins between 3 and 6. They have some good talent over there, including a rising star in Thomas Krupp, who will have 2 sizable linemen to block for him. They return a good chunk of their defense and a quarterback who at least had some playing time last year. So you could definitely live with that. But for them to truly get back to their winning ways, they need their quarterback to step up and revive a passing game to take that pressure off of Krupp. This team also hasn't performed well against the run, and they need to improve. Coleridge and Aspen should be close games here. Obviously, I have them losing to Coleridge and beating Aspen. It could go either way, or they could win both or lose both. Honestly, those are how close those games will be, in my opinion. Those will be super close games. So there you go. And then the Rifle game could potentially be a win, but the defense does need to be better. So there you go. This team should be solid, right? I don't think they make the playoffs. Honestly, I think they'll get close to 500, maybe just below it. But it shouldn't be a horrible season as long as everyone's healthy, knocking on wood here. Like I said, they got their star in Krupp, they got their 2 linemen, but they do need to develop this defense a little bit more and the quarterback spot. But after that, I think things could get interesting if they can do that. But I need to see it before I believe it. So we'll just have to see what happens here in 2024.
And thank you so much, Coach V, for all of those recaps. And now we're going to transition to my side of the episode. And as we rise from a variety of classifications here, we are actually going to talk about a program that is making a jump here from the 4A to the 5A level here in Fruita Monument, where last season they were in the 4A Metro 2 division. And despite losing some big contributors from the 2022 season, they actually played very, very well in this season. They kind of struggled out the gate against some of the better programs, but, beat a Grand Junction Central at home before losing to Montrose on the road, but then really just got a big dub at Skyline to jump out to a 2-1 start, and then following a loss to Grandview on the road here, they would then rip off a very long win streak here, beating Bear Creek, Heritage on the road in what I would say was an upset win, 37-34, beat Grand Junction on the road, took care of business against Aurora Central before losing to Broomfield, and that would be their very last loss of the season here. Simon predicted them going 5-5 with a window of wins of 3-6. And the squad here out of Fruita just overachieved here, going 7-3 here, with their only 3 losses being against other playoff teams in Montrose and Broomfield, as well as Grandview, who was a 5A squad. And they actually won a playoff game here against Falcon 50-12, and then their season ended against a familiar opponent as they had to go on the road to Broomfield here and lost 30-14. But all in all, I would say that was a very successful season where I do truly think that, as reflected in their window of wins, that they overachieved here and got a ton of contributions from their senior class here to make this season work here. But as we look ahead, let's go ahead and take a look on who they will be taking on the 5A classification without. And unfortunately for the Wildcats here, the offensive engines that made their gears tick here, the gears grind, were Amari Wilson and Andre Palafox here. Both were seniors, and those two ran for over 2,000 yards and over 30 touchdowns here. Amari Wilson at the quarterback position also chipped in another 8 scores through the air. And then in addition to that, their third leading rusher, Wyatt Sharp, pulled about 761 yards and another 10 scores. So that's 40 touchdowns of offense that's out the door. Amari Wilson was just built like a beast here at a huge frame. I believe he was like 6'3" or 6'4", well over 200 pounds, and was just very physical and gave this offense an identity along with the rest of their runners here who helped take care of business here. They're also going to lose C. Vance here, and while he was their leading receiver in a very small aerial attack, his 6'4", 190-pound frame was a threat that was hard for defenders to wear down. And then defensively, I mean, this is just going to be a long offseason for a lot of these underclassmen who didn't see a ton of snaps, because of the 17 tacklers with double-digit tackles, 12 of them were seniors. They're losing over 400 tackles and nearly 50 tackles for loss, 20 sacks, and 22 hurries. Some of the pioneers of this defense were Noah Heine, Shad Huddleston, R.J. Jones, Elliott Johnson, and Jackson Lewis, 6'3", 206 pounds. So losing some size up front here. Huddleston, in addition to his work getting all those tackles, had 2 interceptions on his work here. And then Aiden Anderson led the team with 3 picks and 5 pass deflections. So this defense is just losing so many snaps, and this is not the time to be graduating a ton of kiddos and be moving into the 5A division, where, their schedule is going to be tougher this year in some ways. And yeah, it's going to greatly challenge this Fruita squad here. But they do have some playmakers coming back. You have athletes like Landon Phillips, who comes back after recording 2 interceptions and 6 pass breakups here. But the very clear-cut leader of this defense is set to be incoming senior Tatum Williams, 235 pounds, and the leading non-senior tackler from last season. He will be leaned on way more to make plays in the backfield and hopefully win them some games. You also got Benjamin Romero, who registered 41 tackles at cornerback, which is a high total here. And if he can make some plays in the pass game here, that could spell, bridging that gap for all those graduating seniors. You also see Chris Bennett here, who will only be a junior this season, but saw some carries as a sophomore, and is going to need to be a huge part for them to lean on, as well as some other players who maybe didn't get snaps last year to make some impact here. Now, something that is a little bit of a bright spot here is their trenches here, because you do have class of 2026 Cash Ortega coming in at 6'1", 300 pounds. Braden Searsma, their center, 6'4", 320 pounds, also in the class of 2026. Got to work on some footwork here, but could be a very interesting guard prospect on the next level. Then you have the Gillian siblings with class of 25 interior lineman Hunter, who's coming in at 270 pounds, and then his incoming sophomore brother Tucker, who's already at 180 pounds and is a growth spurt away from being a threat at any position, honestly. And so you have some size up front. You're losing the skill players that made that size special from last season, in my opinion. So that, combined with this schedule, is going to make for an interesting season here. Let's go and talk about what their current schedule is on Max Preps here. They're going to also get one more game in here, so just keep that in mind, and we will speculate on what that means. But they do open the season at home against the Legend Squad. Obviously, any of these squads from the metro area that have to make that trek all the way up to Fruita, that's going to be a benefit for Fruita here. But I do think that this Legend Squad is just returning some more important talent in some more important areas. So I'm going to go ahead and say that Legend gets a win there. They then go on the road against Chaparral. Chaparral has been a struggling program who does bring back some consistency under center, but is kind of lacking in a lot of areas here. And, potentially, I just think that this Fruita Monument line is a little bit bigger here, and I think that they could potentially win if they get home to the quarterback, but I do think that Chaparral still probably has a chance to win that game. So that one, I think, could honestly go either way. At home against Grand Junction, I think that Fruita Monument has had their number for the past few years, and Grand Junction is just a program that, while they do return talent in very specific areas, I just don't know if they're going to be able to put it all together to be a team of Fruita Monument's caliber, talent, and coaching. At home versus Montrose. Montrose is going to be one of the better teams in 4A. I still don't think that Fruita probably wins this game, and so they will have one more league game that is not currently scheduled here. So if we look back to last year's schedule for any kind of reference, maybe they get another team from the West or from the North to come out there. like maybe a Grand Junction Central. I know that probably hurts their RPI a little bit, but you got to think about travel and just logistics when, scheduling for a squad like this. So something in that park could potentially be a win for Fruita. And then they play in one of the tougher leagues here, of which I will cover most of outside of Castleview. You're going to have to wait for Gino's preview for that squad. But I think that league is going to be a bit brutal for Fruita here in their first year. They go against a Castleview squad that's returning a ton of great talent in the right areas. I don't think that they win that one. Mountain Vista, we'll talk a little bit more about them later, but I think they'll be one of the top teams in the state. I think that that's going to be a loss once again for Fruita. Valor Christian, I think by this point in the season, is going to have found their footing and probably an identity. As of right now, I don't think it's impossible for Fruita to potentially steal this one on the road, but I am still going to say that Valor wins this football game. And then against Thunderridge here, Thunderridge, kind of a program in flux, trying to identify what they're going to look like here. This one could go either way, but at home, I think that they probably beat this Thunderridge team. So, obviously, as far as their schedule currently goes, I think that they win probably 3 of these 8 games, and then they're probably going to get Rock Canyon as their last league game. I think that that's what's going to just make sense. It's probably just a logistical problem solving of who's going to make that drive this year here. And if they do face Rock Canyon, I do think that is a loss as well. So if they get like a Grand Junction Central, I could see them going 4-6 potentially, with a window of wins of 3-6. I think that 4-6 is pretty fair for their first year in 5A here. Now, I think that 5-5 would be ideal. That means that they pull off an upset here. But I do think that they could go as low as 3-7 if they only beat the teams that they are quote unquote supposed to, a Grand Junction Central, and maybe a Chaparral here. But I think that 4-6, as I edit this a little bit to reflect that, is going to be where I sit here with Fruita Monument heading into the 2024 season. I am excited to see how they do on the 5A level. I'm not sure if this was an appropriate jump at an appropriate time, but only time will tell. And now for one of our more interesting areas of coverage here, we're going to talk about the Valor Christian Eagles here and kind of talk about what happened last year and what the story was looking for this squad. And this was actually, I'm 90% sure, Valor's toughest year on the 5A level to date. Obviously, they've only been on the 5A level for a lot less time than most programs as they made the jump up with Christian McCaffrey. But yeah, this was a tough year, especially out of league here. Valor struggled mightily here, only going 1-4 outside of league and really having to lock in down the stretch. This included a loss to Regis in the opener 24-21. Then it included their first ever loss to Pine Creek 31-17. And then in week 3, they pulled off a crazy comeback win where they were actually down by 3 scores, I want to say, heading into the second half against Fairview, and came back to win 29-28. So, in most other cases, if Fairview had Beckham Kritza at this point, this is probably also a loss. They then played an out-of-state game here where they lost 52-31, and then blew a lead against Ralston Valley on the 21st of September. They were up by, I want to say, a couple scores in the fourth quarter here and end up losing a heartbreaker on the road 22-21 for their first ever loss to Ralston Valley. It was 1-4, not looking good. I think that the rest of the league was kind of, thinking it was going to be free eats here, but Valor and any McGatlin squad is down, but probably not out, and they proved that, rattling off 5 straight wins, beating Castleview, Highlands Ranch, Rock Canyon, and Thunderridge, all with authority, before beating Mountain Vista at home for the league championship 39-34, capping off their season of 6-4 here. But compared to Coach V's projection of 10-0 with a window of wins of 8-10. This was a disappointing season, but for all intents and purposes of a Valor season, especially one that only ended after one playoff game here, losing to Legend 20-13 at home and wrapping up their season here. So, Valor, like I said, worst season that they've had to date as far as their records in 5A goes, and a very underwhelming season from our projections here at the podcast. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the highlights, or at least some of the players that still gave them a fighting chance here in this 2023 season. One of those being Asher Weiner here. He's off to Princeton after throwing for over 1,700 yards and 12 touchdowns, while running for another 400 yards and 6 touchdowns, leaving a major question mark under center for the Eagles here. They have not had the toppest of shelf QBs. I think Asher Weiner was a good, transition here. He came from Kansas and gave them something to work with for a couple of years, but Valor now definitely going to have to find somebody else to pass the football and somebody else to run the football here. Now, Gabe Sawchuk obviously came with a varying amount of success running the football here, but he did lead the team with 172 carries and still found pay dirt 11 times, while I think providing more quality snaps on the defensive side of the ball at DB. You're also losing Blake Kershke here, 5-touchdown rusher, but way more important defensively, leading the team with 114 tackles and also notching 4 TFLs and a pick. Hopefully this young defense took some notes on things he did right and takes a step forward here. And then Alex Jordan was a PMC top 5 edge rusher last season, whose size and strength made him a serious threat in the run and the pass game here. Now, Valor, they are returning some very interesting talent here, and I'm very excited to see how they do with a lot of these skill position players. You're looking at a wide receiver who at Lutheran last year in Ben Herbick caught for 1,300 yards and 17 touchdowns here. He absolutely lit it up in that spread offense that the Lions run. He was their top target, and we'll be looking to make some of that same noise over here at Valor. You're also returning one of the most dynamic playmakers last season in Cash Spence, 448 receiving yards, 243 rushing yards, and 5 total offensive touchdowns. I think that they're going to find more creative ways to get him the football. That's kind of what McGatlin does. And I think that now that you don't have some players that are almost dead weight on offense getting a ton of touches, that's going to open up a ton of opportunities here. Now you also have some beasts returning to the line on both sides. I'm looking at Zay Amaro here, a class of 25 interior lineman. I'm looking at defensive tackle Rocco Cali. I'm looking at Reese Russell, a class of 27 guy who's going to get some quality snaps on either side of the ball. I'm looking at Davis Moon even potentially, who could come in and immediately get some snaps. And then at the tackle positions, Peyton Edwards and Cannon Smith both looked good in some spring ball action, and Smith is a defensive guy who also impacts that run game and is going to help, put the kibosh on some offensive rushing attacks. They also bring back watch list guy Elliott Smith, Jackson Sanders here. Both those guys can kind of get a rotation and hopefully help fill that gap left by Alex Jordan, but just in different ways. You're bringing back class of 25 Moses Freeman here, who had 79 tackles, 4 TFLs, 4 interceptions, along with 3 pass breakups and a fumble. At the safety position, you got Israel Waitman here, who's another class of 25 guy, 3 interceptions, 2 pass deflections, 52 tackles, 4.5 for loss. Look, you have a lot of senior leadership on the defensive side of this football that I think could really help this defense not only play as good as they did last year, but take another step forward. Now, some guys who didn't quite make the watch list but are going to be returning some productivity from last year are the likes of Jack Brown, 54 tackles, 2 for loss. Chase Hanash here. He was one of the younger cats here who got some tackles and some rushing yards here. 268 to be specific. And then Jace Beal, who is the second leading receiver with 364 yards and 2 scores. So this offensive attack here is actually in a great position to be a balanced attack for one, and it's in a great position as well to make some noise through the air. Specifically, if they can find somebody to push the ball downfield, the weapons are there. It's a very easy offense, I think, to step in and immediately start slinging it around the yard, but we will see what that looks like here. So that is the biggest question mark that I have, but it's still Valor, it's still Brett McGatlin, so I am curious just to see how this season goes. And let's go ahead and take a look at the schedule here, kind of just walking through it real quick verbally. You got home against Pine Creek, Regis, on the road out of state against the East Leopards. That is a team from Salt Lake City. Then you have a game on the road against Mullen, at home versus Rowson Valley, and then obviously their league schedule that now includes Vista, Castleview, Thunderridge, Fruita Monument, and Rock Canyon. So let's go ahead and go down the bill here. Their opening game is at home against Pine Creek. I think that they get revenge against Pine Creek. Pine Creek graduating some very important players, but also losing some players in a recent scandal here that has done a number on admin boosters, and Coach Miller has even left, kind of seemingly leaving them to fend for themselves. And maybe a team that doesn't have, solid leadership at this time, whether that's on the coaching level or on the player level. So we'll see what happens there, but I think that this is Valor's game to lose. They then play at home against Regis Jesuit here. I think that for the third year in a row, Valor's in a very dangerous spot of losing the Holy War once again. Regis Jesuit winning in overtime 2 years ago. I was able to attend that game. Obviously, last year's game, high energy, but Regis Jesuit brings back a quarterback and just, their constant depth at every single position. They do a great job of getting their young guys in. I think that this team is going to be ready to roll against Valor, even if it is down the road here. Now, taking a look at East here, like I said, this is an out-of-state team that went 5-6 last year, but did win a playoff game before their season ended in the second round. This team is both losing and regaining, kind of a mix of talent here. Honestly, I think that Valor's defense is going to really challenge this offense here. And I think that Valor should be able to honestly win this game on the road. However, it is an out-of-state game. You are going on the road, but I think that they can snap their out-of-state losing streak here that they've developed over last season and the season before that and get back on the right track and represent Colorado. But, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that just running the football at the same time. So, I'm going to just put a little this or that on that East game. Now, against Mullen, I think that Mullen is still a very young football team. They are bringing back a ton of talent. This is probably going to be the best game that Mullen and Valor have played in a very long time. Granted, they have not played each other a ton, but they are going to be challenged by Kodey Dietrich on the offensive side of the ball. They're also going to bring back some weapons, the Mustangs, but I just think that Valor should still probably win this game. And then at home against Rowson Valley, I think that they win this game as well. Rowson Valley, just kind of a team in flux right now. They're going to have a lot of unproven guys stepping up and trying to make plays. I think that they are going to obviously have some studs, and I think it should be a solid game, but this is Valor's game once again to lose. So I think that Valor heading into league play should probably be 4-1, honestly, but will win at least 3 of these games as opposed to their non-league run last year. Now, heading into league, they do start off against Mountain Vista. This might finally be the year that the Golden Eagles beat Valor. However, Valor, I think, has the mental edge against a lot of these teams in league, and I think that this very first game is going to determine if any of those other teams get over that hump. Obviously, Valor struggled out the gate last season and then went 5-0 in their league. And they're returning to a league that is going to be tough and even more competitive, I think, than it was last year, with a lot of these teams returning very key talent, as I will allude to here in just a minute. But I think that against Mountain Vista, I think this is finally the year that Mountain Vista gets this eagle off their back in their own way and finally gets the dub here. They then play at home against Castleview. I think that Castleview is probably the more complete team all around, but something about this just feels like a bounce back game at home for Valor. And Castleview, I don't know if they are as mentally prepared to overtake Valor as maybe a Mountain Vista is in this league at this time. So I think that Valor rips off 3 straight wins against Castleview, Thunderridge, and Fruita Monument. Then their last game is against Rock Canyon. That one is on the road. I still think that they should win that game, but there is a chance that they lose that one, and Rock Canyon kind of grinds it out, slows it down, gets a couple of scores, and then if Valor has to play catch-up, a lot of these games really depend on what happens at the quarterback position, where I have really no idea if they have a viable solution here. And so Valor, it looks like I have them going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll say 7-3 is where I'm going to have them, with a window of wins of 7 to 9. I don't really think that they go undefeated this season. I think that this is a really tough schedule here. Now, if they manage to dominate their league, regardless of who they have, as they have in the past, that is still a possibility. But I think that 7-3 would be respectable for this season. I'm actually going to even say that their window of wins actually probably going to be 6 to 9, honestly. Just because if they don't solve their quarterback issue, they could find themselves in a hole early, and then, they're just going to go ahead and run that classic McGatlin offense with all those offensive weapons. But I'm going to say Valor Christian goes 7-3 in the 2024 season. And now heading over to the more west side of Highlands Ranch here, we're going to talk about the Thunderridge Grizzlies, whose season Simon predicted spot on here. Simon had a predicted record of 4-6 with a window of wins at 3-5. And what do you know? They go 4-6 here. They start off on the wrong foot with a new coach. Their former coach went down to Arizona. They also lost their star quarterback, rising sophomore DJ Bordeaux, who moved out of state. And they also lost their leading receiver from the prior year. Thunderridge was dealt a pretty tough hand here, but hung in there pretty all right throughout the season, losing to just playoff teams here. Too bad their schedule had a majority of them here, losing to Arvada West to start the season before bouncing back with, I would say, in hindsight, an upset win over Douglas County, 35-21 at home. Then took care of business against Lakewood before losing to a good Chatfield squad that made it all the way to the semis. Took care of business against Chaparral, and then heading into league, lost to Mountain Vista, Castleview, beat Highlands Ranch, and then lost to Valor Christian and Rock Canyon. Just a really tough league, and a really even tougher league for some first-year starters here who even graduated as well here. So, I think that this Thunderridge team is exactly who we thought they were, and I think that the prediction from Coach V and the final record reflect that. Now, they'll be losing some impact here. Ryan Gonzalez was a one-year starter at quarterback who still managed to put together a decent season, throwing for 1,100 yards, nearly running for 600, and had 13 total touchdowns, but was a bit turnover prone. But the biggest story, and size-wise biggest contributor to leave, is 3-star CSU Ram commit Zach Smith, whose 6'7", 275-pound frame in high school helped hold down this line and anchor it for Thunderridge. That is going to be a huge part that they're missing, and something that they lose from their, success in the run game. Looking around at other contributors here, you're going to lose Will Fisher, Owen Klein, Max Hughes, and Drew Pruce, who are 4 of the top 5 tacklers, including Fisher, who is the leader with 94 tackles of this batch. And another part of this batch is going to be 24 tackles for loss that go out the window. Fisher with 6 tackles for loss, and over 200 total solo tackles go with these leaders. I also want to point out that Max Hughes specifically had 4 sacks and 4 of those TFLs, And Drew Pruse here, I hope I'm saying that right, notched 4 pass breakups and a pick in this secondary as well, or in this pass defense. Meanwhile, on the returning side of things, they do bring back running back Evan Olds here. I remember watching his film and being a little skeptical at his size and frame, but his 765 yards and 10 touchdowns were very well earned and deserved. He's a very shifty running back, and he also led the team with 345 receiving yards. They also returned watch list guy Evan Bilby as well. And outside of the watch list, some of the contributors from last year include Dominique Falbo, who's listed at 6'1", and Nick Sang at 6'4". Both these guys are 180 pounds and were the second and third leading receivers on the team. You also bring back on the defensive side of the ball Luke Christensen, who notched 80 tackles last season, and then also Sloan Schilling here, who had 7 sacks and 5 tackles for loss. So they're returning some decent talent in some decent spots, is something that I will say about this Thunderridge squad. But once again, don't necessarily have an answer under center. I think that their line is going to be a little bit depreciated heading into this season. And we're going to have to see how they replace a lot of that defensive talent. Shout out to Colin Lucker as well, who graduated this past season. And now they look to rebuild, but boy, is this schedule insanely brutal. Oh my. They start off the year against reigning state champs, Columbine or Littleton West at home. Then they face off against the Cherokee Trail squad that I do think is just returning a ton more talent. They then play Arapahoe on the road. Arapahoe is going to be a team in flux, but I trust that coaching staff to get it done. And I think that they are going to, once again, just have a good defense and force Evan Olds to not be the guy to beat them here. And offensively, I think that the Warriors actually have a ton of hope at just scoring a ton of points. But, I'll save that. I'll save my praise, my bias, and my alumnus status here for another episode. But then they face Ralston Valley here. Ralston Valley is, once again, like I said, in flux here. So both these programs kind of in a weird in-between, but I also do coach/trust Coach Yanacito here to probably pull out this win for Ralston Valley. Then they're at home against Eagle Crest. This squad is returning a lot of important players at important positions. Then they have league play at Rock Canyon, at Vista, even though that's also kind of a home game. Then versus Valor, versus Castleview, and at Fruita Monument. I'm going to be honest, this looks like it could be a pretty rough season. I think on the optimistic side of things, you beat a Ralston Valley on the road, and you potentially beat a Fruita Monument. I'll say that they get 1 or 2 of those games. I say that, unfortunately, I think Thunderridge probably goes 1-9 this season, honestly, with a window of wins of 1 to 4 on the high end here. I do hope that they go 2-8, but this is just one of the most brutal schedules for a program that is just not returning, prospect D1 level talent. I think that a lot of these teams that they're facing, I would not have scheduled this personally. Obviously, I want them to prove me wrong, but these are just absolute powerhouses week in and week out. And if you look at the teams that they were able to beat last year, they are not in the same stratosphere as any of these teams. They beat Highlands Ranch, that I believe moved down to 4A. They beat Lakewood, that is also a team that is consistently struggling over this past decade or so, or half decade at least, since we started covering it. They beat a Douglas County team that's just wildly inconsistent. This is just a brutal schedule here. And I think that Thunderridge probably goes 1-9 across this schedule. If any of these teams lose to Thunderridge, I think that that's a huge props to Thunderridge. And I think that the other team just probably didn't show up. I think that Ralston Valley and Fruita Monument are the best hopes for wins here, and that they could definitely go 2-8. I could see that as well. But both of those being on the road also hurts that here. So I'm going to say that they get 1 here and that they go 1-9 here with a window of wins of 1 to 4 for the Grizzlies. And, this will be a year to just definitely develop some of those underclassmen and probably look towards the future. Now to sunnier pastures or Amazons here. We're going to talk about the Rock Canyon Jaguars season, how it went last year, who graduated, who's returning, and their window of wins here. And so, the Jaguars, they've become one of the better programs in the state here. They rolled out to a 4-0 start before losing to Arapahoe at home. But then once they got into league play, they started rolling right back again here and, beat a Highlands Ranch team before unfortunately dropping to Vista and Valor, but they bounced back with a tough, gritty win over Castleview 10-3 before ending their season on a win against Thunderridge on the road here. Then they actually won a playoff game against Arvada West 20-14 before their season abruptly ended against Ralston Valley on the road here. Now, they obviously had some dogs up front, but I thought that this team kind of did exactly what they were supposed to do, more or less. Simon predicted them to go 8-2 with a window of wins of 6-9. They end up going 7-3 and then going 1-1 in the postseason. I think that, this Rock Canyon team has finally caught up to the rest of that South Metro Highlands Ranch kind of league and is right up there with them. Finished third in the league, going 3-2, only losing to the two teams that were in the league championship. And so I think that for this Rock Canyon team, they got to feel good about the culture and program that they've built, albeit through not the best means with that kind of wing T-ish offense here, but they have the personnel to make it work, and so they do. But let's talk about some of the beasts here that they will have to replace here. Including every receiver who caught over 100 yards. Granted, that's 4 of them, but they didn't catch that many over 100 yards, so that's not too bad. But defensively, this team is going to be losing quite a bit. You're losing a top 5 interior defensive lineman here in Chaz Barnett. Make sure to go listen to that interview that Gideon and Chaz had. That is going to be episode 372, and that also helps a little bit with the previews here. But continuing on this graduating seniors segment, you're also going to lose defensively Brady Campbell and Austin Bowker. Both of them had 85 total tackles for the team lead, and they combined for 6 TFLs here. And then the secondary is just going to be a lot of replenishing. You lose Abe Chitwood, who is 4th on the team in tackles, and also had a very solid season himself, breaking up passes. And then you also lose North Dakota State commit Will Rosenmeyer here, who is the cornerback 1 for a couple of seasons, leaving a huge hole in the secondary. And, just in general, from the class of 2024, this secondary loses 28 out of 32 pass deflections. That is 7/8 of all pass deflections. You go and punch that in the calculator. Either way, it is a lot of secondary to replace. And then they are also losing 315-pound lineman James Stevens as well. But don't think that because they're losing a lot of high-end talent that they will not be bringing back some dogs themselves, as they have quite a few guys on the watch list here. And even guys who are not on the watch list who will be looking to make an impact. Primarily talking about running back Tyler Meyer here. They still keep their identity on offense as he ran for 1,485 yards. He'll probably make it 1,500 this year and 10 touchdowns. They also bring back class of 26 Jackson Bond at offensive tackle here. And then defensively, they bring back some studs like edge rusher Cooper Melaniak, I want to say is how you say that. Sorry, Coop, if I'm saying that wrong. And then also Brandon Stout, another class of 25 guy, 74 tackles and 2 TFLs, who is a stud over the middle, and I think is also going to be an impact in the pass defend game. You also have Owen Arnold, who is 2nd in touches from the backfield coming back. He had 381 yards and 6 scores last season. He'll probably be leaned on a little bit more. And you're also bringing back Evan Miles, who is responsible for 3 TFLs. So you're bringing back a handful of defense, a handful of offense. And with the way that Rock Canyon plays football, they're kind of returning the most important players at the most important positions for their specific system. and they are always big. They have a ton of depth and a ton of size in the trenches. So I think that they're going to be able to just kind of continue to do the same old thing, which obviously I think puts a ceiling on this team. As you know, we've kind of called them like Littleton West Diet a little bit over the years, and I think that that is what they're going to continue to kind of be. But let's go ahead and take a look at this schedule here and get into it. I think that they still need to schedule, it looks like, oh, psych, that was from looking at their max preps, but they got their full schedule on Instagram. Be sure to go check them out there. But they start off the season against Chaparral. I think that they should win that game. And then they go all the way up north and play Fossil Ridge. This is going to be a very interesting game, in my opinion. I think that this is going to be a battle of the lines here, as Fossil Ridge does return some interesting playmakers, and I think that they have a ton of offense. And with Rock Canyon losing so much support in the secondary, this is an exploitable Rock Canyon team here. But if Rock Canyon's able to control the football and just keep everything in front of them defensively, I think that they're kind of built to beat a team like Fossil Ridge, who, schematically speaking, can kind of shoot themselves in the foot sometimes. So I'm going to say that they steal that one on the road. I do think that they beat Douglas County here and start off this season 3-0. Now, Grandview is an interesting case here. Grandview's returning a lot of talent, and I think that their incoming quarterback, Blitz McCarty, here could seriously help propel that team into the upper stratosphere. I think that they potentially lose this game to Grandview before this game against Arapahoe. This is their best chance to beat Arapahoe, and I think that maybe at this point, right before league, this would be a good time to swipe a win against my alma mater. I'm always going to be tough and underrate my alma mater, though, just because I have to. I feel like a little bit to avoid the bias allegations. That game could go either way, honestly, but for now, I'm going to give the edge to Rock Canyon. Then they got Thunderridge and Fruita Monument. Both of these games are at home, which is important. I think that they win that stretch. And then it gets interesting here as they close out the season against Castleview, Mountain Vista, and Valor Christian. So to this point, you know, I have this squad at about, let's see, 6-1, it looks like. Maybe 5-2 at worst. But this stretch is going to test them. I actually think that Castleview gets their get back here from last year. I think that Castleview is just returning some pretty solid talent in some pretty good spots here. Rock Canyon can still definitely win this game, but for now, I'm going to chalk that up as a loss. And then I think that they also lose to Mountain Vista and Valor Christian, putting them at a final record of 6-4 on the season, but with a window of wins of 5-7. I think best case scenario, you beat Castleview, you also beat Grandview here, and that gets you those 7 wins. But I do think that that stretch against Mountain Vista and Valor Christian, along with just one of those Centennial League games, I think that they just probably drop one of those games against either Arapahoe or Grandview. I don't know if they come out of that stretch 2-0. So I'm going to say that they go 6-4, but like I said, with a window of wins of 5-7. This is going to be another good year for Rock Canyon. They're going to be in the postseason again. They're going to probably get a first-round win, but, you know, I just have some issues with, you know, them probably not maximizing all the talent that they have via the passing game and being a balanced approach that is just going to run them out of gas down the stretch. And now for probably the most dynamic and highly anticipated team on this episode, we're going to talk about the Mountain Vista Golden Eagles here, fueled by the Gatorade Player of the Year and a stacked receiving core. The Golden Eagles flew around the field to the tune of 39.8 points per game in the regular season and end up going 8-2 in the regular season and then going 1-1 in the playoffs for a final record of 9-3 here. Simon predicted this team to go 9-1 with a window of wins of 7-10, so they fall right smack dab in there. They were on par. They go 8-2, just losing one more game that Coach V did say could go either way. That was the opener against Ralston Valley. So he was locked in there, and that was definitely accounted for in the window of wins. But after they lose that opener to Ralston Valley, they bounce back and rattle off all 8 straight wins here, and they do it at a prolific scoring pace, beating Heritage in a crazy shootout 35-34 before scoring 63 points in back-to-back weeks against Fort Collins and Chaparral. They then score over 50 against Legacy, nearly 50 against Thunderridge, nearly 40 against Rock Canyon, over 30 against Castleview, almost 50 against Highlands Ranch, before finally losing the league championship to Valor Christian 39-34, still showing that they could put points on the board. They then got to do a rematch against Castleview where they put on another 50 points for a W before losing to Cherry Creek to end their season, who is the state runner-ups. I think that there's a lot to be happy about with this Mountain Vista season. I mean, they kind of did everything that they needed to do, but they did not take that final step to push them into that, echelon of what it takes to be a championship caliber team. And so we'll see if some of the things that they do this year help with that. But let's talk about some of the pieces that they are going to try and replenish or rebuild from. They are losing their deep ball / jump ball specialist, CJ Reese, whose 6'4" frame will be missed as just another dimension of this offense as he's taken his talents to Army. They're also going to lose their second leading tackler, Wyatt Seaman, who notched 101 tackles, including 65 solo across the stage. And then they're going to lose 6'4", 230-pound lineman and leading sack artist, Zach Ruffle, who takes 6 sacks and 9 hurries with him across the stage. But while those are some high-impact players and some very talented players, this team is still so talented, and we knew that they were going to be heading into this year because a ton of the people doing damage last year on offense were juniors. Talking about the Gatorade Player of the Year, Austin Madreski, 41 touchdowns, and is now the most highly rated quarterback from most projects here heading into the season, and has plenty of weapons coming back to absolutely devastate defenses with. That includes incoming seniors Ja'Kai Mack and Sean Conway. Both of those guys have been catching passes from Austin, especially Ja'Kai, since the beginning here. And he's developed an awesome rapport with them, including last season where these two combined for 24 touchdowns, 125 receptions, and 1,875 yards, while also feeding sophomore stalwart Japri Jennings, who has been a cog in this machine here at the slot position, who caught for nearly 500 yards. Just a great athlete and a very dynamic and explosive player in the slot position here. You also get back Sammy Brown, who's an incoming junior who at 6'1" will have more opportunities with Reese's graduation. I mean, we're looking at a team that could definitely have 2 1,000-yard receivers and then another 2 probably like 600 to 700-yard receivers. No joke. Maybe even 3,000-yard guys. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to get split up, but I mean, this team is just going to be so dangerous through the air. And then finally, when you start playing cover 4, you start playing this prevent defense, and you don't want them to beat you over the top with Austin's arm. They could push it down the field. They're going to go ahead and hand it off to Jack Blaze here. Blaze had an awesome season here. He's an incoming senior. He had double-digit running touchdowns. He finds the open field and can move around the field pretty well. And he could catch out of the backfield as well. So they have a dynamic dual threat running back here who's going to kill you in a variety of ways. And then the offensive line has some very interesting speculation around it, as it might get an influx of one of the best coaches in the state for that position, as well as a very talented 8th grader. Not going to lean too much into that. If you know, you know. Nothing is confirmed 100% yet, but we definitely think that this line is going to be very, very good this season. And they also bring back Jack Heath and Blake Anderson, the 2 anchors at the tackle position. Blake probably more of a guard on the next level, but both of these cats held it down. They're going to come back with some more size, better coaching, and hopefully some quickness, and continue to keep the pocket as well as Austin clean and on his feet to absolutely destroy defenses with. Now, speaking of defense, this defense was very junior heavy last season, with the likes of Shike, Daniels, and Vincent all notching over 70 tackles. And Carter Daniels, he did get hurt last year, but he should be healthy and ready to go this season, as he has taken recovery very seriously. And then looking around, you also have Aiden Vincent, who will look to fill the void of a pass rush left by Ruffle, since he had 5.5 sacks last season and actually led the team with 11 hurries. And then in the secondary, you're going to hear a familiar name in Ja'Kai Mack, who had 6 interceptions last year, but you also have a sleeper coming in Bryce Bailey, who's really hard to get past and really hard to create separation against. So I think that, this Vista team, one of their biggest issues last year was size. That is something that you can fix in the offseason with weight room work, as well as just dieting and proper attention. So if they paid attention to that, they could address what was the folly of their ways from last season and really turn up and even improve, I think, on a season where they still went 8-2. I think that this could be a historic season for Mountain Vista. And, they are the only ones who are kind of in their way at that point. And it will start off in a very interesting way for Mountain Vista, as they will fly out to Hawaii to face Pearl City. Now, Pearl City did a very good job last year, going 9-1 here, winning some games pretty big and also winning some close games on, that island out there. So we'll see how the Golden Eagles do. I do still favor them in this game. Then they play at home against Arapahoe here. I actually had an early look at a 7v7 matchup between these two squads. And Mountain Vista, there is some rust for sure, but they're definitely a team that I think will push Arapahoe. And especially with this game being at home, I think that this is a game that they can win. Following that, they play an Erie squad who I think is going to really test them. These games back-to-back are going to test the physicality of Mountain Vista. This has been a team of finesse over the past few years, and we've seen that when physicality is brought to the table, it's really hard for them to match that. Whether you look at last year against a Valor squad that was very, very physical, Ralston Valley, who is very physical and held them to their lowest point total of 7 points, Cherry Creek last year. You look at their 3 losses, they struggled mightily against teams that were a bit more on the physical side. You go back 2 years ago in their opening playoff loss to Rocky Mountain, it happened in the snow, and they just got out-shoved against a team that ran the ball very well and was able to control the football and not have to just rely on slinging it all over the yard. So these 2 games against Arapahoe and Erie very early on are going to let us know if this is the same old story with the Golden Eagles come playoff time, or if this is maybe a new team that has a new edge to them heading down the stretch of the season. But continuing on here, they then face Cherokee Trail on the road. This should be a win. This could kind of be a little bit of a shootout here, but I think that Vista is probably just a bit more refined version of CT here. Then they play Overland, and that wraps up their league play here. I think that they could very easily go 5-0 in league play, but I wouldn't hate 4-1. 3-2, starting to show me maybe that this team is the same old, same old. If they go 2-3, oh no. But like I said in the Valor segment here, heading into league play, this is Mountain Vista's league to lose, in my opinion. I think that they should go 5-0. I think that they should beat Valor, Thunderridge, Fruita Monument, Rock Canyon, and Castleview here. It's going to be a mentality thing more than anything else. Obviously, health is going to have to be on their side. But really, this Mountain Vista team should not do any worse than 9-1, in my opinion. I don't think they should. I think anything below 8 wins is a disappointment as well. So I'm going to say that Mountain Vista, I think that they probably just drop one. Part of me really wants to say that they go 10-0. Really, truly, part of me wants to say that they go 10-0. But man, I just know that they tend to just drop the ball in kind of big moments here. So I'm going back and forth here. I'm really torn. The window of wins is definitely 8-10. I think, like I said, anything below 8 wins kind of is a disappointment, if I'm being completely honest. But you know what? I'm going to... you know what? I'm going to be optimistic here. I think that Mountain Vista, every game that I've been talking about them, it sounds like they should win. I'm going to say that they go undefeated this year. They go 10-0. But if they go 9-1, I'm still going to take credit for that because their window of wins, like I said, 8-10. This is going to be a very good football team this year, but are they going to be a great football team is the question. I think that the talent is there. I think that the leadership is there. I think that they, if this acquisition that I think is happening is going to happen, that gives them the edge that I think they've been missing out on, and it just brings forth a new sense of physicality for Mountain Vista to go undefeated. Mountain Vista, don't make me regret picking you to go 10-0. But that will do it for this episode with this big ol' recap for you here. I know that we had a ton of teams on this. I know that it was a little bit of a crazy listen here with Coach V as well. But make sure to double back and listen to our other previews here. Coach V has absolutely been killing it, mainly talking about Southern Colorado, 1A through 5A, with a couple of other schools mixed in here and there, including a 3A Frenzy episode where he picked up a ton of 3A listens here. So be sure to listen to all those and stay tuned for more of my upcoming previews, as well as Gideon and Gino, who will have their own episodes as well, kind of down the stretch here. And in order to be notified of all of those postings, events, episodes, make sure that you are following us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Brinker, I think is another one. We also upload to YouTube at Playmakers Corner. Anytime you are on any of those platforms, make sure that you are subscribed, following, like it, and have notifications turned on to find out all of the latest episodes. We are also just going crazy on the socials this summer with flag football as well as tackle football content. So be sure to find us on Twitter at Playmaker Corner, and be sure to stick around on there on X/Twitter, because we do run polls on there that are very important for you, the fans, to be a part of down the stretch of the season. And then on Instagram or TikTok at Playmakers Corner, where we have a ton of graphics, videos, highlights, and all kinds of fun stuff for y'all to take a look at. I have been your host for this episode. I've been the showrunner for this episode, Kodey Stauffer, obviously accompanied by Coach V's segments in the beginning. Thank y'all so much for listening, and peace.